Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home.
Hello, Karen. We are back again.
We are back again. Welcome back. And we have our guests here Emily Marison and Dave Marison from Ohio State. Thanks for joining us again this week.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This is the second half of the Marison Marathon. This is where the spirit comes out.
You have to know we love that you call it the Marison Marathon, by the way, in our family. We so love that.
It just seemed the right way to wrap up the end of the year here and start the new year too. And I'm really excited to have you guys back again. We gave a little teaser on the last show about wrapping up your farm finances and getting ready for the next year. And so we have Dave who's going to walk us through some important steps and help make sure that we can keep our farms sustainable and strong for the next year.
I'm happy again to be on your show. It's a great show that Karen, that you and Dan have. And yet the end of the year, of course, is always can cause a little bit of stress because we're trying to work around all the holidays and work around our families. But also it means as farm families that we're starting to go through those boxes and grab receipts out of the truck and starting to look at how, and it's probably you, right? It's those receipts are in the glove compartment of the truck where it's shoved or up in the visor, or maybe if it's made it to the house, it's on a desk. And I know I've seen quite a few farm desks that are just piles and piles of paper, and that one.
Which pile was the receipt in?
Right, and that co-op bill may have been stuck in with your favorite farm magazine or favorite newspaper, and it.
Receipts make great bookmarks.
Yes, and they're just missing, right? So this is the time of year that can cause a little stress, especially as we turn away from some of our favorite activities, which is like managing the cows or doing the crop work, to where we have to turn our mind to that financial side, to where we start to look at the year that was and then do some budgeting for the year that's going to be next year.
Yeah, that's right. You're talking about receipts, Dave. One of the things that I have found helpful is when you have the option for online receipts where they send it to your email. Sometimes I'm so glad I can just reference something digital. It's like it's time-stamped, it's there, it's nice and clean. And if you're able to print it out, that's one place I like to, if I remember and it's a place where I can do this, that's always just a great safety net for me.
Right. And I'm a Gen Xer that identifies more clearly as a baby boomer. So I'm the type of person that loves to get the paper receipt in the mail or the paper from the co-op as I come home after getting feed for our goats. But I really do appreciate now that sometimes those receipts don't make it to the place that they should. And you can spend hours looking for those receipts. So taking advantage, like you're saying, where especially it says, do you want a print receipt? Do you want an email receipt? I will actually select both. I want the paper receipt just to fulfill that baby boomer in me. But also sending that email straight to myself that if I need to find it later, I know I can go back, do a search in my Gmail account and find it. So yeah, I'm slowly being, and my wife will say maybe too slowly being pulled into that financial electronic age.
Too slowly.
So she will tell you. I said I don't even know what all this online stuff is. However, it's more important that as a farm family that we have a process that works for our family. So if you're a shoebox kind of filer, that's fine as long as you have some system in place. If you're an electronic person that likes to keep everything in an electronic mean, that's great. It's just that you develop a system that works for you and your family and that you follow through with that system.
Yeah, I mean, my system is that I like to take pictures of my receipts because some receipts, they use that heat-sensitive tape, And if it gets left on the dashboard, it will actually just turn black and you get no information. Or if you put tape on it, or if it gets taped to a box or something, the tape will actually make that line of the receipt disappear. And it gets really hard and frustrating at the end of the year. You're looking at these receipts, and you're like, I don't even know what this says anymore. And so I try to take a picture of mine and store them in a file together online. So
Right, and you're right, because the minute you put that into your wallet and then you sit on it 1,000 days in a row, by the time you pull that receipt out of your wallet, you can barely even read anything on it, or it gets wet a couple times out in a rainstorm. And bottom line is the IRS is very comfortable with electronic receipts. So getting some type of pattern where you take a photo, there are some apps, there's some beautiful apps that are out there, depending on the financial software that you're using, that you can actually just snap that picture and it will code it down into the app that you might be using. So for some of the techie savvy type of folks, there are ways to do that as well.
So Dave, so we're at the end of the year. Obviously, tax season is coming. It's not here, but now is kind of the cutoff for what you're going to claim for that year. So, what are some of the things that we should pay extra attention to, or maybe even sometimes get missed, and it's really important?
Yeah, and really at the end of the year, I know there's a lot of people that are there, what we would call that tax mitigation, where they're trying to avoid paying taxes, where they're scrambling to put their numbers together because they don't want to pay income tax on maybe extra Schedule F for that farming income that we have. So they may be looking at pre-buying feed or supply, or making some payments ahead for their insurance on their farm, or buying some type of machinery that they might be buying. But I think the key there is, have you looked at, do you actually have all your numbers together, where you actually have them in a spreadsheet or some type of accounting software where you actually know where you're at as far as income and expenses for the year, and that you haven't forgotten anything.
Yeah, that's a good point. At the end of the year, people do like to make sure they've spent what they wanted to on their business, to make sure you're right. Like you're getting all the credit back that you are entitled to, and that you're doing things economically in an economically beneficial way to you and your farm and your family. So that is a good point. Just kind of make sure that, one, you've made the cutoff, right? Because if it's already 2023, you're not going to claim anything until the following year. So just understand that aspect as well, to make sure you have good timing with that.
And that's what we would recommend, Dan, as you go into the final quarter of the year. If you're hitting October, once we hit October, and we understand that for folks that are row crop producers, that is a very time-sensitive time where they don't have time to look at financial management because they're busy harvesting crops. However, as we push into the last quarter of the year, we should have up-to-date books there before Thanksgiving, to where we can have a farm business meeting where we sit around, we look at the accounting, where do we actually stand for the year, and then if we want to make some of those purchases to help with taxes, then we have plenty of time to do that. Definitely the week of Christmas, the last week of the year, is going to be a tight pinch for you to do any type of tax mitigation things that you might want to do, just because you'll run out of time.
So it's really important to make sure you're keeping good records, right? I know at Ohio State Extension, we do have those record keeping books. What are your thoughts on those?
We have the commercial farm account book in a couple different manners in our extension offices. One version it's like the old double entry accounting books. Others are a smaller version. In my mind, and Bruce Clevenger is our farm management specialist that really works in depth on the farm record keeping. But I know Bruce would tell us that use the record keeping system that works for you. For some, it is hand entry on a commercial farm account book like we would sell at our extension offices. For others, like ourselves on our farm, we put it into an Excel spreadsheet and manage it through an Excel spreadsheet. Others might use Quicken or QuickBooks. But bottom line, it's which record keeping system are you as a family unit going to be able to use to track the expenses, and what manner is that? Then as long as it's a manner that you're comfortable with, the big thing is just keep those records.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that in the past years when I have been teaching Annie's Project, which is a farm business management training program that is available nationwide. And it is a really great program to just introduce you to the different risks on the farm. But record keeping is a big part of that project. And one of the biggest stumbling blocks that our students have had is fear of Excel, for lack of a better term. And so I found that in Excel itself, if you are using Excel but you're not real comfortable with it, there is a built in tutoring program inside of every Excel program that you can get through the help menu and or from the main menu. You just open it up and it'll show you how to get a tutoring program. Go through at least the first one. You will be amazed at how much more comfortable you feel. It's a very well written system and will help guide you through. But once you feel a little bit more comfortable, you'll be a little bit more likely to use the system that you've set up for yourself. Because if you're not comfortable with your own record keeping system, but you feel like, well, I should be doing it in Excel because that's what my accountant wants me to do or whatever, you need to feel comfortable with that program. And so take some time to give yourself a little bit of training. I know it's not as exciting as, learning how to better control Colorado potato beetle, but it's still just as important to the success of your farm.
Yeah, and I would echo exactly what you said. Whatever you're comfortable with, and get the training that you need. If you're trying to maybe go to Excel or Quicken or QuickBooks, there are trainings that our universities through Extension offer, as well as a lot of our career technical centers may having some evening classes in a particular area. Now, they may be a lot more broad when it comes to talking about accounting than just at the farm level, so it's for any business or family. You can steal some ideas on how to come back and use that type of system in your own operation.
So Dave, when we're talking about the Form F, so you're filing the taxes for your farm operation, what are some things that you've noticed that get missed by a lot of farmers that maybe people should be a little bit more attentive to?
Yeah, good question. And any way that, Dan, I'll say the first thing that you do, any way that you keep your records. Now, of course, record keeping can give you more power than just tax management, because record keeping ultimately should be how you make decisions on your farm with the different enterprises that you're raising. But a lot of times we look at our financial record keeping like, how do I spit out what I need to put on that Schedule F? So if you set up your system, whether that's on paper, whether that's in Excel, whether that's in Quicken or QuickBooks, whatever it may be, model that against those questions that ultimately the Schedule F tax form is going to ask you. So you might have a whole area just as for vet medicine type of things, or for fertilizers, or for pesticide use, or for sales, receipts for sales of crops or for livestock. Now, one of the things that they might overcome, and of course, we would always say if you have any questions about the farm tax side of things, the Farmer's Tax Guide should be your first stop, your first reading materials, and that's publication 225. That's the Farmer's Tax Guide. Now, if you go to the irs.gov website, just www.irs.gov, and you just put in the search publication 225, you can download the Farmer's Tax Guide right to your computer. Or if you're near your extension office, a lot of our extension offices have the hard copy of the Farmer's Tax Guide that you can pick up. Now, Dan, I'm coming full circle back on your question. What's one of those things that they might forget? Well, number one, if we have poor record keeping and getting that records or the receipts into the house, into the farm office, we might forget of some expenses that we've had that we may not traditionally get direct billed. For instance, we might have a billing at the co-op and they bill us once a month, or the veterinarian office, they'll bill us once a month, we'll pay it, and then we'll have a record from what they sent us. But a lot of times you might stop into, say, a Tractor Supply or a Farm and Fleet, wherever you may be, and you just run in for a couple of things. You say, oh, I need that for the farm, and you'll pay for it out of cash, maybe in your pocket. But if that receipt never makes it back to the house, then when you're doing your year-end tax recording, there's an expense that you could have deducted that never showed up, so you can't deduct it because you don't have the receipt, nor probably if your memory is like mine, you probably don't even remember that you bought it. Another thing is mileage reimbursement, as well as educational expenses that you might incur from going to let's say, an extension event. So let's say I'm over in Ohio County, right? Ohio County, West Virginia, and I roll into an extension, and maybe there was a program that cost me $25, and it was something about help me better manage my farm. Well, that educational fee, the fee that I paid to go to that meeting, is a deductible expense, as well as the time if I jumped in my car to drive, of course, to the meeting, or maybe I've driven a couple hours across the state because the only place I could find the part that I needed, and had to drive a couple hours, get the part, and bring it back to my farm. One of the things we forget to do is track our mileage and then use the mileage as expense as a deduction. And those meeting expenses that we might have, maybe the online course that we take for record keeping, there's a cost that we could put on our deductions for the year on our Schedule F.
So when you're saying this, obviously the record keeping is essential, but really just make sure you're putting in your record keeping any educational event that has helped you out. And it might not even be like a direct farming program, but it might be something like, Excel, learning how to do Excel, learning how to, like the QuickBooks, just things that are indirectly farm related as far as running a business. So I can see how that would get missed. That's a very good point. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that will really help you in this respect is making sure that your farm business is completely separate from your personal accounts. So you should have a separate farm business account from which you make payments from. And that will really help you to track what was spent for your home and what was spent for the farm. And you really do want to keep those expenses separate, have a separate credit card, do 2 separate purchase orders at the store, make sure that you're keeping those accounts separate. That can make your life so much easier at the end of the year when you're looking at a receipt and saying, okay, did I buy that for the farm or for my home?
Right, and I agree, Karen. All those, you want to run it in a business-like fashion, and that in keeping those accounts separate with a separate checking account, separate credit card. Those are just easy ways to help organize you as you're trying to keep the personal versus the farm. Now, of course, sometimes our farm income is enhanced by our day job, and we might it might scare us how much of our money that we're earning from our day job might be pulling. If we're a part-time farmer, where we're pulling that income stream over to help the farm business, and that's fine if you know that's where you're ultimately going, is that you're building the farm for one day for its profitability to come completely from itself. But just keeping those accounts separate, it allows you to analyze and make better decisions going forward, for sure.
Now, Dave, can you talk a little bit on paying family members as workers on the farm?
Absolutely. I would say that you will want to pay farm workers. So just like you would in any employee that you would hire, there's different ways that you can pay that. There's even pay minor children that they can be paid on the farm. But it would be just like you would hire any other employee, making sure you're following the employment laws that your state, whether you're in West Virginia or Ohio, that you're following those laws that are within the state that you live in.
But I'm talking, like, I know a lot of farms, one of the biggest struggles for record keeping is labor hours, and even paying oneself to have a record that time went into the production of that product is a critical thing when you're looking at the longevity and sustainability of a farm.
Right. And as you pay yourself, bottom line is that, your net farm income, and then becomes what is then going to pay your principal that you might have on loans, principal payments, as well as that owner withdrawal comes at the end. But the one thing is, like, that you're mentioning there, Karen, that I can think about is, well, what is my rate of return on myself working on this farm versus there's an opportunity cost of working on the farm. So that net farm income that we receive at the end of the year, if you divide that by the number of hours that, of course, you've put into the farm, then you'll kind of know what your hourly rate actually was, because you have the opportunity to go to work for somebody else, another business, at a set rate when they hire you. But I think it's harder sometimes for us to capture actually what am I making per hour of input that I'm putting into my farm, and looking at that net farm income at the end of the year and dividing by the hours that I've put into the operation. Then I can kind of get an idea on that. I think that might be a scary hourly rate to some people, depending on the amount of hours.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just don't want to know that.
And some people might not know, and that's okay. It's another tracking mechanism, but if you're interested, it's really good for farms to do that, as far as, for all of us, using a daily calendar, we could come up with some type of tracking mechanism where we know the amount of hours that we're putting in. Doesn't mean you have to do that every year, but it'd be really nice to do that every couple years so you can kind of see what is your rate of return. With that said, sometimes some of us farm not for the pure income of it. Some of us will farm because of the stress relief that it affords us. I know working with animals at times is very soothing and is a great stress relief for some folks that might have stressors elsewhere in their life. So what kind of value can you put on the value of the stress relief that you might get from that farming activity? That's hard to put a dollar figure on that, but that should be thought of the process. All of us enter into the business of agriculture for different reasons, and we need to know just from the beginning what is the reason that I'm in the farming business. Is it a purely profit motive to make as much money as I can, or are there other quality of life issues that maybe are hard to capture on the financial side that really add value to our entire life?
I know most farmers, at least around here, are part-time farmers, right? They have full-time jobs or part-time jobs, and
Correct.
then they have another full-time job at the farm when they get back. So, we talk about keeping those accounts separate. How important is it to record income that we get from the farming operation versus our personal jobs?
From just the ease of it, if you keep them separately, with the farm income is going directly back into that farm account, and then the personal income is going into the personal account, just keeping those separate just makes it a lot cleaner and makes it a lot easier to actually look at the profitability of the farm that you have. And understanding close to 70% of the farmers in our region here are part-time farmers. So it is a part-time type of enterprise for us. And I guess that's part of that goal setting that you have for the farm. How much money do I need to raise from the farm? Or is it, as I mentioned before, is it a lifestyle? But keeping those records apart, that just makes it so much easier to analyze your business.
And there's also tax implications associated with money coming into the farm. So it's really critical to make sure that if you are farming as a productive enterprise, that you are represented in that way on your taxes, because it has some legal liability connectivity or connections as well.
See, and that's where I was going too, Karen. And Dave, that's why I was asking this question is, let's say there was an audit, right? You get audited and you have to justify the profitability of your farm. And then the problem is now you have your personal, your daytime job and your farming job going into the same place. And it just kind of becomes hard to pull out what the profitability or what the income was from your farm versus your daytime job.
Right. And you talk about the audit, Dan, and one of those things that's mentioned is it clearly says this in the farmer's tax guide are you running your farm business in a business-like manner? And part of that it talks about in the record keeping aspect is that you're keeping these separate accounts, that you're tracking the accounts separately, that you have some method in place to be able to do that. Also, the differences of where it falls when we do the 1040 tax form is the mothership. That's where all of our income then ultimately goes back to. But some of our income would be a Schedule F income, say the Schedule F income for farming. But some of the things that we do at home may be on a Schedule C, which is a small business. From the farm side of things, we know that there are benefits, tax benefits, that are probably more advantageous for the Schedule F tax filer versus, say, a Schedule C, because America loves farmers. So there's some tax benefits. So making sure that you get the income and the expenses in the right area. Where you would come across in some issues for an audit is people claiming expenses on the Schedule F that truly are not Schedule F or farming expenses. They are personal expenses, but yet we're trying to claim those expenses as a farm expense, and that might show up in an audit if we get audited. So it's pretty, trying to keep things in their place is really important when it comes to tax management for sure. And, we think it's all so easy, right? It's so easy. Oh, yeah, just keep good records. But we understand it is hard during life, right, to keep records. This is hard. This is like Emily was speaking in the last podcast about just the things that you do for food safety. You think, well, these are common sense. They're so easy to do. And then you're like, no, life has a way of getting in the way. I'm sitting here looking at piles of farm records, like the feed bills, that I have yet to input into our data collection system because life this fall has just gotten in the way. So it's like, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. And good record keeping means you take it one bite at a time. You just keep plugging at it, keep finding ways to improve, and sit down. If you know that your record keeping has maybe not where you would want it, well, maybe that's your goal for this new year, that I'm going to do better at record keeping. And Emily will chime in, says her goal is that still we sit down once a month with a cup of coffee on a Saturday morning and review our farm records. And my record keeping is always sometimes maybe not as fast as it should be. So someday Emily and I are going to have that goal that she has, of where we actually sit down and have that nice cup of coffee and actually review at a month's end, where do we sit on our farm and our personal finances as well.
Before the football games, right?
Right, before the football games.
Well, that gives you that time bound, right? So that way you're more likely to keep it short and sweet so that it actually gets done. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us. David, we really appreciated having you on the show. And Emily, we appreciated having you last week. And thanks, you guys, for joining us for the end of the year Marison Marathon. Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.